Great. Thanks, Steph. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get this kicked off. Like Stephanie said, this is the Native HUD Housing Counseling Network informational webinar. Can you hit next, Steph? Ooh, actually, I can. Cool. So the presenters are going to be the First Nations Owista team. So we have with us Crystal Langholtz, our COO, Florence Ludka, our CFO, Linnell Smith, Programs Manager, and myself, Heather Rodemaker-Taylor, Director of Programs here. And so essentially what we're going to be covering is we're really kind of launching this program, and we really want to share as much information as possible with everybody and answer as many questions as possible too. So what we're going to be going through with this webinar is kind of the fundamentals of HUD Housing Counseling, the training necessary to become HUD certified, and go over kind of a Native CDFI case study, and then also talking about building a network of Native CDFIs and Native nonprofits. And before we kind of jump on into everything, we really want to give a big thank you to our partners. It's really possible for us to actually launch this program and kind of really get started and bring in groups and work with Native CDFIs and Native nonprofits on building this HUD Housing Counseling Network because of funding from Wells Fargo and Fannie Mae. So we just really want to give them a shout out first before we kind of dive in, and we just really appreciate their support with this. So with that being said, we're going to kind of, like I said, dive into who and what is HUD, just to kind of give everybody a framework and kind of good foundation for where we're coming from. And then we'll kind of go more into like our program and what we're thinking with this too. So that being said, I am going to mute myself and I'm going to turn it over to Florence Ludka, our CFO. And Flo, I think you're muted still.
Okay, how about now? Can you hear me now?
Yep, absolutely. I'm going to mute myself now.
Okay, great. Okay, hello everyone. And so we're just going to talk briefly about what HUD is. So HUD is a government program, and it stands for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It is a government agency, and it helps people throughout our nation get and maintain quality, affordable housing. They also train and sponsor housing counselors all over the country. So, and it's pretty well widespread so that they're able to reach like really rural communities, which is where most of us are practicing. And the next slide. So this slide is about what is a HUD-approved housing counselor. They're especially trained and certified by HUD. They help people assess their financial situation. They evaluate potential options if people are having trouble, like either obtaining a mortgage or even if they're having trouble making their payments and going into foreclosure, things like that. They also provide a bunch of education around purchasing a home, including the foreclosure prevention, like I previously mentioned. And they also will help you, like, kind of be the liaison between you and your mortgage servicer. If there's like any questions about it, or if they want to compare different offers from different mortgagors. And then the last one there is just more, more education and more training and counseling surrounding the home buying process. So there's some basic requirements, and these, and we're just going to kind of touch lightly on these right now. It goes into much more detail in the HUD Compliance Handbook, but the HUD Compliance Handbook is actually in the process of getting refurbished or redone, so to speak. So these are just the basics, and once you become a HUD housing counselor, we're going to have like additional trainings on all of the compliance sections. So the first thing is an action plan, and with an action plan, um, it it basically is going to outline what your agency is going to do in order to meet any of your clients' housing goals. Um, and when it's appropriate, that action plan will also have like kind of a outline for addressing housing problems in your particular area. The other requirement is that you have to be a 501c3, so you have to be duly organized and existing as a tax-exempt nonprofit organization, and you must be in good standing under the laws of the state of where you're organized, and authorized to do business in the state where you'll be providing the housing counseling services. The third thing is a client management system, or a CMS system, which is similar to Otis for those of you who are on Otis. A CMS system must be in place, and that's where everything that will be recorded for the intake, your client intakes, file creations, collecting and reporting of client level information, and that could be including but not limited to financial and demographic data, the counseling services that you provided, and what the outcomes of those counseling services were. And then the fourth thing is a housing counseling work plan. And the work plan is a little bit different than the action plan. And in the work plan, it explains the needs and the problems of your target population. So whatever area your target market is in, that work plan needs to explain the problems that you're experiencing. And then the second part of that work plan is it will address one or more of the needs and problems with its available resources. So what they're asking for is they want to know that you're going to be able to provide these programs to your clients whether you receive HUD funding or not. So they want to have those resources listed. You also, in the work plan, would need to list the housing counseling services that you are going to offer. You're going to have your fee structure, if any, recorded on there. The geographic area to be served that you'll be serving, and then what your anticipated results are within a period of time. The next thing is experience. Every HUD housing counselor agency must have administered a housing counseling program for at least 1 year in accordance with HUD requirements, and we'll talk for a little bit further about that in some other slides. Documented compliance with fair housing and civil rights laws. So all that is really saying is that you must have it documented where you are complying with fair housing, and that could be something as simple as having the fair housing and civil rights laws on a sheet that you can hand out, and have that be actually part of your file and everything, where your client can like actually sign that they received it. So you just have to have basically everything documented. Kind of think of it with like as the same as some of the government grants you're working on, where they ask for a little bit more details, and you have to have documentation surrounding that. The next thing is evidence of funds immediately available to cover the cost of operating a housing counseling work plan. So this kind of works almost the same as like a grant that you have with matching funds, where you have either you have to have a 100% match, or maybe just a percentage of that grant as a match. And so you're pulling those from other funds, and this kind of works the same way. You kind of have to record or provide for them what other funds you have that you'll be covering the cost of this counseling work plan, in addition to any money that you may or may not receive through HUD. Then the next thing is the 8th thing down. You must employ staff trained in housing counseling, and at least half of the counselors must have 6 months worth of experience. So this is just saying that if you have a HUD housing counselor on staff, that you have to have evidence of their training, and it has to be documented. And that documentation has to be available for performance reviews if and when you might get one. And then the next one is language. And then that's all that's really saying is that you have to be able to provide this counseling in the language of your target market. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a housing counselor that's bilingual. That just means that you have to have the services of an interpreter available if you need that for the target market that you're trying to serve. And then the next one is knowledge of HUD programs and the housing market. So your staff and your housing counselors, they must possess a working knowledge of HUD's housing and single family mortgage insurance programs like FHA and other state and local housing programs available in the community. And the staff should also be familiar with housing programs offered by conventional mortgage lenders and other housing related programs. And that's just saying basically that HUD wants you to be able to provide, expertise in areas so that you can actually guide your clients and give them like comparisons between the different programs available and maybe between like the different mortgage products. So you're like really not allowed to like push one or the other. You kind of have to let your clients make those decisions for themselves. But you just have to have that documented that you're actually giving them like a choice of, what they choose. And then the next one is community resources. Every HUD housing agency must demonstrate an established working relationship with other private and public community resources that you can refer your clients to. And that kind of goes hand in hand with number 10, the knowledge of the other programs available in your particular market. So you just need to document your relationships. It could be with like other banks, your tribal housing authority, credit unions, different things like that. Facilities, you have to have a clearly and properly identified office with private space available for housing counseling services. Another one of the requirements is there must be permanent signage identifying the housing counseling office. That's just one of the compliance issues with HUD. I know that kind of might sound a little bit weird to some of you, but they just want to make sure like that everything is private and there's going to be confidentiality for client records and different things like that. And then a certified HUD housing counselor. So you have to have at least one certified HUD housing counselor, and we'll talk about this a little bit further with slides later in the presentation. And then the last thing on this list is counseling. So one of the rules is that you must be able to provide counseling as opposed to just education. So education is also a requirement. So just because you have, housing related educational classes, that's not, you have to take it a step further and you have to be able to provide that housing component as well. Okay, the next slide, please.
Perfect. We just got to it, Flo. It's a types of HUD approved counseling.
Okay. Yeah, so the types of HUD approved counseling, there's several. So the first one is education or one-on-one counseling, like I mentioned previously. You also, you can have your focus efforts be on education, but again, you have to be able to do the counseling as well. You pre-purchase home buying, including general financial education. So for those of you who are like doing B&Cs and different things like that, that general financial education falls under that category. The other types of approved counseling or training are resolving or preventing mortgage delinquencies, and then post-purchase training, training on rental housing, training on reverse mortgages, and then homeless assistance. And then let's see, the next slide.
Yep, we can see it on our end.
Okay, yep, I can see it now too. So this one talks about the fees for housing counseling. So you are allowed to charge for fees. There's only 2 different trainings or counseling that you're not allowed to charge for, and that would be foreclosure prevention counseling and homeless counseling services. Those you have to offer free of charge through this program. The other types of education, including the pre-purchase and the reverse mortgage and post-purchase counseling services, those you are allowed to charge a fee for, but the thing to keep in mind is that you have to be able to provide the counseling without charge to people who demonstrate they really can't afford to pay for it. So even though you're allowed to put a fee structure on it, if you have like a client or a family that comes in that really can't afford it, you have to be able to, you can't turn them away because they can't pay for it. You have to like bring them in like under a scholarship or something like that. You have to, your fees have to be part of your work plan and all laid out, and you have to provide those to your clients in advance of providing them services. So it has to be totally transparent and upfront. And then your fees, they have to commensurate with the level of services that you're providing. So you want to be in line like with other trainings in your particular target market and what, other agencies may or may not be charging for those same trainings. So you have to kind of be, leveled with everybody else in your community, as well as the ability for them to pay. And then the next slide. And I'm not sure, is this mine still too, Heather?
Yeah, the benefits of becoming a HUD
Okay.
housing counselor.
All right. Yeah, I just didn't want to be stepping on anybody else's toes here.
No, you're all good.
Okay.
Actually, I wanted to pause too and just let folks know. I sent out a message to all the attendees, but definitely feel free to ask questions throughout. We know we're going through a lot of information, so feel free to pop them in there and we'll just stop where we are and kind of answer questions as we go too. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, yeah, so the biggest benefit of being a HUD housing counselor is that many of you are probably already providing some level of these services, if not most of these services. And if you're not charging fees for those services, this kind of becoming a certified HUD housing counselor gives you the kind of the opportunity to really get some grant money coming in for services that you're already providing with no change in your programming. And so through that, there's an annual competitive funding allocation through HUD, and it's usually correlated based on the amount of people that you serve. And it's been explained to us that there's really no guarantee that we're going to get that particular grant, but the likelihood is very high that we would be awarded that on an annual basis, that we would then spread out amongst our network. Then second benefit would be messaging with clients and funders around accreditation. So just the fact that you can, call yourself a certified HUD housing counselor is going to have a lot of merit, not only with your clients, but also funders. And then once you become a HUD housing counselor, you become eligible for a lot of other grants and available pots of money that are out there that are all working toward housing. And then the last thing there is comfort in knowing your organization is well trained and can answer housing questions well. So even though some of these like restrictions or some of this compliance part has seemed like, oh, that's a lot that we have to do, once you accomplish those things and get through all of that and become certified, there's like a lot of like comfort in that, knowing that like you're really an expert in this area and an expert in this field and will be able to really serve your clients in this regard very well. So this is another question.
Is
Okay.
that you, Flo, or is that Linnell?
I think it's Linnell.
Oh, perfect. Linnell, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. I know you're on the road, so there you go. You're unmuted. We're talking about the HUD certification.
Okay, great. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so if you hear background noise, I'm in a parking lot at the airport. So, okay, so to talk a little bit about the certification exam, Flo went through some of the big pieces of kind of what this all means. So, in order to be a a certified HUD housing counseling agency, you do have to have at least one HUD housing counselor certified through their certification program. And just to give you a little bit of background to what that exam looks like. So you do have 90 questions, 2 hours to complete the exam. You can go to a proctored testing site, or you can do an online webcam proctored site. There is a fee to it. So in that exam, there are 6 key areas that the individual would have to be knowledgeable in, and then there's sub-modules within that. So HUD's approach to this is to make sure that these counselors have a broad level of knowledge required for certification. So when you look at the 6 areas, you currently may not be providing those specific services, but in order to become a certified agency, you have to have the knowledge around it. One thing on the positive side, once you do become a certified agency, this gives you an opportunity to expand your services. So the 6 areas are financial management, housing affordability, fair housing, homeownership, avoiding foreclosure, and tenancy. And so within the financial management key area, you're looking at the budgeting, credit, managing and protecting assets. Under housing affordability, you're going to be knowledgeable in renting versus buying and giving affordable housing options to your clients. Fair housing, you really start looking at the history and all of the laws that have been put in effect for people that are seeking homes. So you'll have the history and overview and violations and complaints in regard to fair housing. Homeownership, which I think a lot of you that are interested or maybe even doing some sort of housing counseling, you may be doing the pre-purchase and post-purchase, so getting the families ready for a mortgage loan. And then you're also under the avoiding foreclosure, you have the avoidance strategies and industry practices, retention options, disposition options. And then the last category is tenancy, so obtaining and maintaining tenancy and eviction. So there's a lot of information that you will be obtaining knowledge-wise. So one of the things that I think is in your favor as well is that they do have practice exams available. Those are free, unlimited number of times you can take the practice exam. So that'll be really helpful in preparation for the actual certification exam. So I think that's it on that slide, Heather. Oh, just one last thing on the last bullet. So other certifications, and some of you that might have participated or have attended these sessions. So NeighborWorks America actually has their own certification, and they call that NCHEC, which is the NeighborWorks Center for Homeownership Education and Counseling. And so these are really good trainings that you can participate in through the NeighborWorks Training Institutes in order to kind of build your skill sets around areas that maybe are not quite as comfortable or familiar with just yet, in order to prepare yourself for the exam. So they have their separate certification, which kind of leads into the next slide. So I used to work and run a Native CDFI. At that time, it was Navajo Partnership for Housing. It is now Navajo or Native Partnership for Housing. And we were a chartered NeighborWorks organization under NeighborWorks America. So that charter actually gave us the designation and ability to be a HUD Housing Counseling Agency. And so one of the benefits that we had were the training opportunities, of course, through NeighborWorks America, but also under this umbrella. And I think either Flo or Heather did discuss it or will discuss it, but there's the potential for the organizations that are part of this network to access additional funds that really support the organization's education efforts. Because if you're currently doing it or have started looking for funds to kind of fund that piece of your activities, it's a little hard to do. So this was a great opportunity for us under the network. So we had minimum requirements that we had to educate families. And so it was a really good opportunity to build capacity within our own organization. Plus we had additional learning opportunities through that network, and then also the funds that were available.
Thanks, Linnell. So we've heard from Linnell and Flo about kind of different pieces, both kind of HUD compliance pieces and a wonderful case study, and also kind of what the certification exam means. And so from there, I'm going to talk about okay, well, here's all that groundwork and information. What does that mean for you as a Native CDFI? What does that mean for you as a Native nonprofit? What is OWISTA doing here? Why are we holding this webinar? And so we're kind of going to jump in there. I did want to pause for a quick second and let folks know, once again, feel free to ask any questions. I know we're going through a lot of info. So if you just either type in your question or you say, hey, I have a question, and we can unmute you, just feel free to do that. We'll be watching that too. So that being said, what we're doing is building a network of Native CDFIs and Native nonprofits. Can I go to the next slide? Perfect. Thanks, Steph. So OWISTA's program, what are we doing? So first of all, we just really wanted to say it's important to say we're meeting demand from the field. And some 2018 research that we did across Native CDFIs, we discovered that 40% of Native CDFIs desire to fill a gap in their services and lending by adding a mortgage product and developing a homebuyer readiness program. We've also just heard directly from folks, whether it's email, phone, in person, that this is really a big demand from the field. And so we really wanted to meet that need. And so essentially then what we're doing with our program is we're becoming a certified HUD Housing Counseling Agency and intermediary ourselves so that we can meet that need. And to do that, we're creating a HUD Housing Counseling Agency network as part of that. Next slide. Thanks. So in terms of our program and what it means, essentially it means we're going to have an application process for this network. All Native CDFIs and Native nonprofits are welcome to apply. Like Flo said in her HUD compliance, we do have to limit it to 501c3s right now, just because as it stands right now, we're not able to include tribally designated housing authorities just because of the HUD compliance rules. And we are looking into 7871 groups too. But currently, just the way it stands with HUD compliance, we really have to stick with 501c3s. And so that's why we're saying Native CDFIs and Native nonprofits. So you can see kind of that flows into the next piece, that applicants must be a 501c3, be committed to becoming a certified HUD Housing Counseling Agency, and already provide at least limited homebuyer readiness programming. And really what we're looking for is commitment, fiscal strength, impact tracking, whether it's our Otis system or another system, but need to be willing to use kind of our HUD module and ours. And then it kind of flows into the application requirements. Essentially, the application is going to be comprehensive, but not too onerous for folks either. It's obviously going to be a series of questions kind of touching on these pieces of what I was talking about, the kind of pieces we're looking for, the commitment, the fiscal strength. It's going to require proof of 501c3 status, just so we're following that HUD compliance. A most recently completed audit. So groups do have to be audited groups, which I know can be a hurdle for folks, but it's something, again, that we have to require because of the HUD compliance pieces. Financial statements, so your balance sheet, profit and loss for your most recently completed fiscal year, and your most recent financial statements. And then essentially in terms of when we're going to be opening this application for folks, it's going to be opening beginning of November, and we're going to have it due mid-November. And so that's what we're shooting for. And that's why we wanted to do this informational session now, to kind of lay the groundwork and provide information. We also spoke about this and provided this same presentation at the OFN conference last week. So some of y'all may have caught that. And we'll also record this too. So if people want to revisit and kind of see what the program's about and some of the compliance pieces, but that's really what we're shooting for with our program and kind of the application piece. Next slide. Thanks. So then our timeline, kind of segued into that with talking about kind of what the application piece was. So you can see here, announce our program, provide information, October 2019, check. So that's what we're doing right now, that we did both at OFN and we're doing with this webinar. In terms of November, like I mentioned, that's when we're going to be doing the application process. And then by end of November, going into December, that's when we'll select groups and sign MOUs with groups. We are shooting for 11 groups in the network. You need to have at least 10 to be in network. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And we will have kind of MOUs with each group and be in a good amount of communication with folks. And then in February 2020, we're actually going to be holding a NeighborWorks HUD Housing Counseling training in Boulder, Colorado. We're still looking at the exact date. It will likely be the first week in February. And that's going to be a full 5-day training with an exam. And that's part of that NCHEC program that Linnell was referring to. We thought that that would really lay a good groundwork for any of the folks that are chosen as part of this program and in the network to really build capacity as much as possible and prepare folks for not only HUD Housing Counseling, but also to get certified and take that HUD Housing Counseling exam. And then by March 2020, and this is why that impact tracking was so important, that's when we're going to begin tracking as a network, really setting up those compliance pieces right away with folks that are in the program so that we can start tracking as a network and really be preparing to become an intermediary, because we're showing that track record of a year of already tracking this data, and we'll be fully supportive of all the groups as we're working through this so that you know what's expected, you know what we have to do to meet HUD compliance, and that we're setting up all the systems in place that are going to support y'all. And then you'll see throughout 2020 and going into 2021, we're going to have technical assistance. We're going to be holding trainings, including trainings that are going to be requiring folks to travel, and we'll be providing stipends for that travel and covering different costs. We're going to be having monthly calls with groups, again, to support this development of this network, support any issues people are facing, kind of allow peer sharing. We're going to be holding different webinars. We're also going to be holding study groups for that HUD exam. And then 2021, really shooting for having folks take the certification exams, though you can take them early if you're feeling ready, and kind of launch the network. So that's, a pretty big overview, but that's really what we're looking at in terms of timeline too. And then what do you get out of this? So if you're thinking, okay, it'd be great to be a HUD counseling network and, it'd be great to be part of this program, but what do I get out of it? We kind of talked about some of the benefits of being a HUD Housing Counseling agency, but there's also benefits to joining this program. So some of the immediate benefits are, technical assistance, training, and webinars. you're also going to, if you're a program participant, you're also going to receive $10,000 in operational support to build your capacity in becoming a certified HUD housing counseling agency, because we really want to support your hours and your time that you're committing to this. And then you're also going to be part of a peer network of support. So like I said, there's going to be study groups, monthly calls, etc. Oh, and I'm seeing some questions, so I'm just going to pause for a second. So I see a question from Amanda. I understand that you must meet 2 requirements to be considered a HUD certified housing counselor. 1, be an employee of a HUD certified agency, and 2, pass the certification exam. That's correct. Would becoming a network member meet the requirements for number 1, or does the native CDFI or org have to get that designation on its own? And so I'm actually going to unmute Flo on this one and Crystal. But I believe the way I understand it is you're absolutely right. You essentially have to pass the certification exam, but you yourself at each organization have to be an employee of a HUD certified agency. But like I said, I've unmuted both Crystal and Flo, just so they can explain that in a little more detail.
Sure, I can get started. Can everyone hear me, I hope?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yay, okay. So this is Crystal Langholtz. Hi, everyone. And Flo, feel free to add on to this as I go. But so yes, becoming a network member of UESTA Network would eventually mean that you would meet the requirement of number 1, be an employee of a HUD certified agency. So how this would work was we as a network would apply on your behalf for you to be a HUD certified agency as part of our network. However, because you have to have a full year of experience and documentation of that year, that we would not be able to immediately meet that objective, which is to say, if you fill out the application with us, what we're basically doing is building our whole capacity as a network over the course of the next 1.5 years so that we can meet that qualification and that you would all be certified HUD housing counseling agencies. And thus you would all be certified housing counselors. Flo, do you have anything to add or clarify what I just said?
No, what you said is exactly right. And so that it kind of goes back to that previous slide in our timeline where whatever native CDFIs that join our network in this initial process, we're actually going to start collecting data right away. And so that we'll have that, starting right away, January 1, so that our goal is to actually apply for that intermediary certified agency status with HUD in the first quarter of 2022, because that'll be when we have that whole year's worth of impact data and the other information that they require for that.
Yeah, and you will, it's really exciting, it's great in a lot of ways. The benefit of using and working as part of a network instead of applying individually on your own is that we would do all that application process for you. When we apply as a network, you'll note, if you peek at that when the application comes out, you'll see we start to ask some questions about your target market and who you're serving. We'll start to ask some questions about that. And those are questions that are directly already on the application. So as we would do the grant application on behalf of the entire network every year, we would also be doing that full application to get you approved as an agency on your behalf as well. And HUD is really moving to wanting to have individual organizations be part of networks and to use intermediary organizations. In this case, they're incentivizing that by providing more resources towards network members that are part of networks. I think it's because it's it's easier for them, and then and networks of course get to leverage and learn from one another, which is great. So yes, you would meet that qualification, and a lot of the pieces of our application are designed to support us in being able to fill out and get those meet those requirements on your behalf when we do the application a year and a half from now. Maybe a year and a couple months if we can get really fast and furious on it.
Yeah, so there's just two more things I wanted to add here. One was that other than the individual client data input into a CMS system such as Otis, OESTA, as the intermediary, is actually going to do all of the HUD reporting. So you as an individual on our network, as an individual CDFI, really won't have too much reporting to do other than what OESTA is going to require from you in order for us to do the HUD compliance reporting. So that's actually like a pretty big lift that you as individual CDFIs won't be responsible for. OESTA is going to take that on as the intermediary. So that was like another benefit that I kind of wanted to throw out there, because it is kind of a heavy lift, and you really won't have to, you know, worry about that part of it, other than, like I said, your individual client data that will be required, you know, that you enter that into the CMS system. And then the other thing is related to the slide previous to this. So, and I might be speaking out of turn here, so please forgive me to the rest of my team if I am. But our initial cohort, if you're not selected in our initial cohort, we will be adding additional groups to our network after this one, after we're actually off the ground with this one. But initially, we're only going to take like 10 or 11 groups. And that's because we felt, you know, because of the heavy lift with all of the reporting and just getting everybody, you know, on the CMS system and doing everything that they need to be, like their certifications and everything, we felt that that was really like the most that we could handle, like initially. But if, you know, if for some reason you're not ready right now or whatever, we will be adding people, you know, in the future.
Thanks, Flo. No, you're absolutely right about that timing and adding other groups. So I'm glad you added that. I'm also really glad that you spoke to the additional benefit, because yeah, that's absolutely something that, yeah, we should throw it and highlight too, is that we're essentially acting like kind of a HUD back office for you, so that you're not having to deal with them as much and kind of doing a lot of those pieces. And I actually just saw a couple other questions pop in. I was looking at the chat, and now I've looked at the question and answer piece here. So I know I see one question from Stephanie Davidson. It says it was listed that in February there was a counseling exam training with the exam. Is that correct? Then you said in 2021 you'll be doing certification exams. A little confused. Please clarify. Absolutely. So in the timeline, yeah, no, so this is totally me. So in the timeline, the February, there will be an exam. So I should have been more specific. So that's specifically going to be a training and exam. That's a NeighborWorks training and exam. That's that NCHEC exam. So that's really just to prepare you, just in general, and to prepare you for that HUD exam. A lot of folks find that going through that training is extremely helpful to prepare them for both taking the exam with HUD and kind of knowing what's going on with the HUD housing counseling requirements. And then the 2021, we're helping you prepare for that actual HUD exam that is with HUD itself. And so that would be the difference. And actually, Linnell, I'm going to unmute you really quickly, because you've gone through this February training and can kind of speak to how helpful it is for doing this work. So I'm just going to unmute you now if you want to add anything additional. Or I'm trying to unmute you anyway.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So the NCHEC certification through NeighborWorks America, it's actually a course, the 5-day course, which is the homeownership counseling certification, principles, practices, and techniques. So this 5-day course really digs deep into housing counseling. It's really geared to individuals that have been doing one-on-one counseling for at least a year. So it's helpful to have a little base knowledge. But even if you don't, this is like total dive into all the different areas. So talks about affordability, savings, just working one-on-one with your clients, a lot of the laws and federal requirements, talks about the file management system. I think Flo had mentioned like what's required by the agency itself. We discussed that in the class. So it gives you a really good in-depth look at what you're going to have to do as a housing counselor. And then a lot of the information that you're going to be obtaining is going to help you in the HUD Housing Counseling certification exam. So the exam after this class, you have 30 days once you complete the course, the 5-day course, to take the exam. And I believe there was 105 questions. There's no time limit. You actually get 3 tries to pass. If you don't pass it, then you take the class again, and then you're able to take the exam. But honestly, 2 of our team members took the class. We did pass, so I have total faith in everybody that would be able to do that as well. So I don't know, I'm not sure exactly, Heather, what your thoughts were around like additional prep and study groups for that specific certification, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks, Lino. And then I see one more question on here too. It says from Melissa Camp, do you know how many Native CDFIs and or Native nonprofits are currently certified housing counseling agencies? And I'm gonna unmute everybody if it lets me. So I've unmuted Flo, Crystal, and Linnell. Oh, I'm trying to unmute you, Flo. Do y'all know? Because I know there are other Native CDFIs and Native nonprofits that are definitely certified housing counseling agencies. I just don't know the exact number. I don't know if y'all know that.
So this is Crystal, and to my knowledge, there are 2. So this is really the travesty that we're trying to correct, which is to say that many of you are doing this work already and not receiving these the funding or resources that are available through HUD. And so, yes, as to my knowledge, there are 2. And if one of them I can think of is Hawaiian Community Assets, which of course has a CDFI that does consumer lending. The other is Native Partnership for Housing. But those are the only 2 to my knowledge. There might be more, but it certainly is not as prevalent as it could be given how many individuals and organizations are working so diligently in this space already.
Oh, and I see here 4 Directions is one. Sarah shared that.
Yay! Thanks, Sarah. There's 3 guys. Maybe more, but I now know of 3.
Thanks, Crystal. So I'll dive in unless I see any other questions, and I'll keep my eye on there. But I'll just dive back into the program benefits besides being that back office group for y'all. So again, technical assistance, training, and webinars. It's going to be pretty intensive TA focused on meeting the early requirements to achieve HUD Housing Counseling Agency certification and the longer run requirements of kind of rolling all of this out. And so it'll be completely dependent on what your needs are as an organization. We'll tailor the TA for that, whether it's financial management or impact tracking or anything like that, or the development services themselves. So that'll be pretty tailored by groups that are in this program. The training, that'll be a big piece of this. And like I said, we'll be providing stipends and scholarships to trainings, which you can see in that final bullet under immediate benefits. And so it would be stuff like that February training. We're bringing NeighborWorks in, doing that NCHEC training on site with y'all as a group, as a cohort. And then webinars too, like as y'all come to us with different needs or challenges, we'll create webinars that meet those needs. And we'll also have webinars that we're just kind of creating based on needs we know we're going to be there. Like, hey, let's talk about compliance. Let's talk about, what it means to have a ready facility, what it means to actually track your counseling clients, that kind of thing. And then again, you're part of that peer network of support. And so that's going to be those monthly calls where we bring everybody together and we're really kind of either putting out information that's relevant to y'all, either having y'all share challenges and opportunities, or we're sharing them too, or we're potentially even having y'all run some of those calls too, if that ends up making sense. And then also those study groups, helping people study for the big HUD exam. We really want to support y'all as much as possible in there. Oh, and then I'm seeing a question come through, so I'm just going to pause. If you already have a certification for NeighborWorks course, does that count towards this certification? And so if you do have a certification for a NeighborWorks course, it will count towards whatever certification you obtained. So I know they have several. So if it's, I guess, some other kind of certification, it wouldn't necessarily apply to the NCHEC certification. But if you do have an NCHEC certification, absolutely. We can find other trainings that will support you. We'll still want folks to kind of come to this as a refresher as well. But we are talking about also providing stipends and scholarships to training, whether they be hey, you know, we'd love to get certified in B and C or something equivalent. That's financial education. You know, let's pay for you to get to that and get that certification because that's going to support this work. Or, hey, you know, we're going to support you and provide a scholarship to a Pathways Home or something equivalent. That's like a home ownership training. So yeah, we'll try to be really flexible with your needs too, if that's helpful.
Heather, can I chime in?
Oh yeah, absolutely, Linnell.
Yeah, so with the NeighborWorks certification, they actually have, I believe, like 7 or 8 different certifications that you can get. The 5-day class that we will be hosting in conjunction with NeighborWorks is under the homeownership counseling certification. So it just depends on which one you have. So if you've already completed the HO 250, the one that I just talked about, the 5-day class, and you would be required to take an additional course, foreclosure basics, in order to obtain the homeownership counseling certification under NeighborWorks. So it just depends on which certification track the individual is on, you would be able to like credit. And I think they have a 3-year certification. So if you took the class 3 years ago and passed the exam, you're right on that cusp of where you may have to take the class and the exam again.
And this is Crystal, and I just want to build off of what Linnell's saying, and I just wanted to clarify too that you know, and I know you explained this really well, but I think it's just so confusing, or so confusing for me, that when we're talking about the NCHEC certification, which is super useful here, or any certification that you've received from NeighborWorks, super awesome in building your skills to support you in receiving ultimately the HUD certification, which you have to go through a HUD proctored exam to receive. It's really difficult. Only unfortunately, I don't want to scare you, but 1 in 4 pass it the first time, but we believe in you all. So that certification that you have to get through HUD, the NeighborWorks certifications are awesome, and they're going to build your capacity to ultimately go for the HUD certification, which was what is required to be a HUD certified counselor. But that's why we're going to have this training. In the idea of the programmatic work here is to have the training in February that we could all go and participate and learn on. And then of course going to support you all in doing some of the work, learning. We're going to have support webinars to keep building off of those things, and you'll have study groups that you're going with as well that are going to ultimately design to get you HUD certified through the HUD training program. So just wanted to provide that clarity. And of course, we do think those NCHEC, the NeighborWorks certifications, are very useful for ultimately supporting you in having that HUD certification ultimately.
Thanks for that clarification, Crystal. Linnell. That's actually really helpful. And just so y'all know too, these benefits, and then I'm going to go into expectations, these will all be outlined in the MOU if you're selected for the program. We'll also do kind of a webinar with you to lay out this in more detail too. So, and we'll kind of have more of those pieces laid out as well of like, this is exactly XYZ what you need to do to make sure we're in compliance and you're getting certified and you're on the right track. So yeah, we'll be diving in deeper and deeper as you get in deeper and deeper with us. But yeah, the immediate benefits, again, that operational funding, $10,000 in year 1 to help support you as you work with us as we build this network together. Stipends and scholarships to trainings. And then the long-term benefits are really, and Flo touched on this a little earlier, was funding from HUD as part of the network. So essentially, on behalf of the network, OESTA applies each year for HUD funding that then is able to be dispersed out to all of the groups in the network. And so essentially, like Flo said, you know, it's not promised each year, but it's likely that it would come through. And so that's something that's going to support work that you're already doing. So we find that to be a really good long-term benefit. And then again, those ongoing monthly calls, training, TA, and support from OISTA, you know, it doesn't stop, you know, once we're just done with this immediate launch and programming. It's going to continue on as part of the network. And so I just really wanted to highlight that too. And can we go to the next slide? Oh, thanks, Steph. And so then the final piece is expectations. So, you know, with the expectations, we kind of touched on this a little kind of throughout the presentation, but really that data tracking and reporting, both it's going to be quarterly, and this is going to be both financial management kind of pieces like your balance statement and your profit and loss, all that kind of stuff, and how you're kind of spending on the program and your impacts. That's something that's going to be part of HUD compliance period, but it's something we're going to start in that first year to start building out those muscles, building out those tools, and building out that track record of kind of collecting that quarterly. It also is going to include things like HUD compliance tracking, which might be things like case file review. And so that might mean, and this is again part of us having to comply with HUD compliance, which is a funny way to say that. But yeah, so essentially that might mean, you know, hey, we have to check to make sure that you're, you know, keeping the correct files, you know, on your counseling clients. You know, so it might be a quarter where you hear from me and I'm like, hey, can you electronically send me 3 files at random? I look through them, say, hey, they have X, Y, and Z component that they're supposed to have. They're meeting compliance. I did my spot check. You know, y'all are good. So that's the kind of thing that we might be looking at in terms of data tracking and reporting. And if I miss anything, Flo or Crystal, just let me know. Some of the other expectations are attendance at trainings, webinars, and monthly calls. We really expect folks to be, you know, as engaged as possible, especially on those monthly calls. We've really been mentoring under NeighborWorks Montana, another group that's an intermediary in this space. And they found that the monthly calls are really useful for both their network, and we've spoken with some of the folks in their network who kind of echoed that thought. But yeah, we just kind of really want that engagement to know that, you know, everything's on track, everything's going well. If you need support, we're providing it. If you need anything, we're providing that. And engage in TA where needed. So, you know, as we said, you might be needing to build, you know, extra capacity and impact tracking or financial reporting or rolling out your development services or anything else in this space. And so, you know, just kind of working with us so that we can kind of find the best solutions for y'all and provide you, you know, any support where needed. And then provide housing counseling and training or financial education to at least 30 people per year. That's one of the big HUD compliance pieces. So that's an expectation that we have. And then finally, pass the HUD exam. You know, at least 2 members. We're hoping that at least 2 staff members should build capacity and take that exam. We did this as kind of a backstop for, like, you know, there's turnover, there's life, there's different things. So, you know, if one person falls off the grid or, you know, has to find another job or whatever, you know, we always have at least one backup staff member that's, you know, a HUD certified counselor. And so that's one of our final expectations on here. And I just wanted to also call out too that we're essentially in it with you on this. We too also have to have at least one staff member that has to take and pass the exam. And so several of our staff members ourselves, like, we're studying, we're going to be going to the same trainings as you, we're studying, we're going to be in that study group. We're going to be sweating it out, hoping that we're one of those 1 in 4 that pass the exam. And so we're going to be right there with you, kind of going through this process. So yeah, I just wanted to share that piece too in terms of our expectations and where we are with you. So finally, let's do this. So, you know, we went through quite a bit of information. We went through kind of some of the HUD compliance pieces, case study, you know, what's involved with the HUD exam, what is our program? And so, you know, we just would love to get this launched. We're going to be launching, like I said, the application in the beginning of November, and we're ready to kind of take this on with y'all. So that being said, I'm going to move to the next slide. Which is Q&A. So I know that we had folks kind of asking questions as we went, but now we have some time. We built out an hour and a half for this webinar just to make sure we didn't feel rushed and had plenty of time. So, you know, if we don't have a lot of questions, obviously we'll end early and let y'all go back to your work. But we have about up to half an hour for questions. So if anybody has anything they want us to clarify, I know we ran through a lot of information. This would be a great time to, you know, ask any questions, raise any concerns, have us clarify anything like that. And any of us will hopefully be able to answer y'all. So I'm going to leave that open and see if any questions or comments kind of come through. Oh, I see one question already. So Stephanie asked, will you be sending out the applications to this webinar participants? Actually, that's a really great question. That's something we can do. Initially, we had planned to just kind of do it as our newsletter blast. But yeah, if you've actually gone to this webinar, we'll have all of your names and emails, so we can absolutely do that. And applications for cohort due date. So that's going to be mid-November. So the earliest it'll probably be is November 15th. It'll probably be the 15th or the 22nd, to be honest. And then I see another question here from Louise. How are you selecting your 10 to 11 groups? Yeah, so that's also a great question. So it's going to kind of go back to those pieces I was talking about in the program and the application. So some of it's going to be required. Like, we're definitely going to first screen for, like, are you a 501c3? Are you committed? And are you already providing at least that home buyer readiness programming? And then we're really just going to be looking for things like commitment, fiscal strength, you know, impact tracking, and things like that. So that's really how we're going to be screening as well. And I don't know if some of the other folks on the team want to add to that too.
No, Heather, I think you've covered that really well. You know, we want to support our native CDFIs, and so we want to meet you where you're at in this space. We also really want this to be successful and to build a network of really committed individuals. And so really looking a lot at the commitment and some of those pieces, but I think you covered that really well, Heather.
Thanks. Yeah, so those are some great questions. Just give folks another second or a couple minutes if they want to add any more. And obviously, if you don't think of all of your questions right now, you know, it's an hour later, a couple days later, and you're like, oh shoot, I really wanted to know this about their program or this about HUD, you know, definitely feel free to email or call us too. And we're happy to answer questions at any time beyond this webinar as well.
I also just wanted to apologize about us not fully knowing what date the application is going to be due. What we're waiting for is we're waiting for approvals from one of our funding partners so we can send out our press release. Our goal is to make sure that you have at least 2 weeks to fill out the application. So we're kind of ready to go live once we've been given the green light, but we just want to make sure we build enough time for you to fill out that application. So it will be, I'm sorry about the mid-November for right now, but it'll probably be either the 15th or 22nd, as Heather mentioned. But that's the reason for our we're not indecisive. We're waiting on some of our moving pieces here.
Thanks for adding that, Crystal. That's a good point. Cool. And I'm just seeing if there's any more questions coming in. And then Linnell, Crystal, or Flo, is there anything that came up for y'all as we kind of went through, or some of the questions? Anything else you think we should add about the programming or benefits or compliance or anything like that?
Nothing that I have to add. I'm good, Heather. Thank you.
The only thing I wanted to add was, in light of Sayer being on this call, which is just to say, if you're already a certified HUD Housing Counseling agency, you'd still absolutely would be eligible to be part of this building the network piece that we're doing, and for all the associated financial resources that go with that. Especially in this case, you know, a lot of times it would be wonderful to have you be in that space, because we could really learn from your experience. If you're already really working actively in the space. So just so you know, on the off chance you're thinking, oh, do I qualify? I'm already a HUD certified counseling person, or just know we want you to. We want to get a variety of people in different experience levels, where the network is going to be stronger with that. And so yes, we would welcome your participation no matter where you're at in the spectrum.
Oh, thanks for adding that, Crystal. And yeah, it actually reminded me too, if there's some folks on here that like, you know, you're like, man, I'd love this, or, oh no, it's not a fit, but you're thinking of other folks that are, definitely send them our way too. And like we said, it's not just going to be Native CDFIs, even though that's primarily usually our big focus. It's also going to be Native nonprofits. We know there are groups out there that are doing this work, that are doing home ownership counseling, but they're just not lenders, and that's totally okay. And you're welcome to join the network too. So just know that it's not just Native CDFIs, it's also Native nonprofits that are also doing really important work in the space that we want to support. Perfect. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions come through. I don't want to linger anymore in the quiet. So yeah, if you think of any questions, you want to, like I said, shoot us an email or call. We're happy to answer them at any time. And we're just so excited about this program, and also so excited to get to work with many of y'all. But like I said, we'll be blasting out more information about the program and the application to our newsletter. And we can also, like I said, send it to anybody who is on this webinar. So thanks, Rolina, for asking about that. But yeah, that being said, I guess I'll go ahead and close it. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.